welcome back to the Real for Life podcast and a special edition, which is what is it like to be in a relationship with me? I'm Lance Wigton. I'm the communication director here at Real Life Ministries. And once again, in this podcast, I'm with my good friend, Beth Koep. And Beth is soon or working towards going out on her own and being a counselor on her own, which I'm very excited about, called Koep Counseling. So look for that. Okay, let's get back into it. So last time, when we visited our superhero, we talked about action and urges and finding out more about our emotions. And you used a easy one because you didn't think I was ready for it. You needed to get training wheels on me. We used people driving too slow in front of me, and I was angry.
Yes.
Right, which it was not difficult for me to draw from.
Right.
This time we're going to use more of a real example and stretch it out. But the first thing you said you wanted to do was talk about what are the. There's a lot of emotions out there. We've seen that off this list. A lot of emotions out there, but really it all boils down to 10 primary.
So this is from dialectical behavioral therapy. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of words for emotions, but they are kind of shades of the same color. It's blue or whatever, so like sad, whatever that might be. So these are kind of the 10 to boil down to. You have lots of different ways you can say it, but these are the 10.
Now you said a phrase there which I'm not, diabolical? What was that phrase?
It seems like it, but that's for the people who don't like feelings.
Oh, well, that explains why I heard it that way.
Dialectical.
Dialectical, so I can touch it?
No, so what it means is two opposites that sit in the same space. Like, I accept myself for who I am, and I accept that I need to change. How do those both fit?
It's complicated, just like life itself.
Right, kind of like grace and truth. Seems like they're opposites, but they aren't. And so we're going to spend some time in talking about like reason and emotion and how they seem like two sides of this teeter-totter. So a dialectic is like two parts of a teeter-totter.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the primary emotions then would be?
So the 10 would be over here, would be anger, fear, sadness, disgust,
Yeah.
envy, jealousy, yes, they're different, shame, guilt, love, and happiness. So those are kind of the 10 that we left off with, talking about hopefully starting to identify, because naming your feelings is where you kind of start the process for managing them instead of them managing you. And so
the reason that I want to get to this emotion is because right now I am having those emotions, whether I deny them or not, or whatever I think is going on. I'm having those emotions, but until I can name it or put a handle on the root emotion that's causing these urges and causing these responses, causing these behavioral changes.
yes.
Then I really can't change these behaviors in the future. Is that right?
Right. So kind of like talking about this action urge. So you kind of hit on it. Our emotions are the energy and the power that motivates us to do things. And so if I know what engine is pushing the boat forward, I can start to manage the boat, versus if I don't know what engine's there and the boat's just moving around, I'm not in control of it. And so what we kind of started with last time was we have the name of the emotion. We have what we call prompting event, something that happened that set it in motion. If you're having an emotion, something happened. And you became aware of it. Like if my friends talk crap about me, I don't get mad about it unless I know about it. Okay, so prompting event. And then I have the urge. I have the action urge, something I want to do. And again, just because I have the urge doesn't mean I do it. I learned in my culture whether anger is acceptable or not. You know, with my dad, anger worked. With my mom, anger was scary because bad things happened when people got mad. So based on some of your experiences and what you believe about anger, you may follow through on the urge or not, but the reality is you have the urge. And that's what we talked about last time. So in identifying the emotion, you have the ability, and sometimes, again, this would be a detective, that's what we talked about last time, right? If I want to step in, which would be for anger, that's my urge to step in. What it tells me is I can backtrack to my prompting event, which is going to tell me what my need is.
Okay.
Because my need is in the first feeling I'm having, because it's telling me I'm identifying something that's happened, and I'm understanding the situation is this, and if it's this, then this is my need. And I can't test whether it's true or not if I'm dealing with the wrong engine. So if I think it's anger I'm dealing with, and the engines go, but really it's shame or guilt, I'm on the wrong engine, and I don't have any power over where the boat's going. And so it's really important to kind of come back here to your needs. So one of the things the reason why we did the training wheels anger first is because actually what you identified is kind of like compound emotions.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a cluster. I like to describe them as firecrackers because they set each other off. Okay? And so learning what your cycle is really important, because all of us have it. We have personalities that God put us together with. We have cultural context for what we believe in God's word. And so we have this cycle that you can potentially go on. And so when you start to dive into the cycle a little bit, you learn some of your coping skills.
So now you say cycle, you mean it would be like, a lot of times I've heard people refer to it, we're on the crazy cycle again, or here we go again, if they're talking about somebody else. Or
Right, so like if you have somebody that you give feedback to, and you want to be like, hey, that wasn't really helpful, and their response is, oh, you're right, I'm a terrible, horrible person, I'm the worst person ever, I shouldn't even be here anymore. Cool, I can't give you feedback, because every time you do that, you just go on this rant about how you hate yourself. It's actually a coping skill. It's a way to deflect actually accepting that feedback, is to go this cycle, I hate myself more than you can, therefore I win. It's this interesting thing. And you don't even necessarily know consciously that you're doing it, so it's really important. So like using mine, so in my family, anger worked. Anger won the day, and so I learned pretty quickly that if I wanted stuff done, anger was a big deal. It mixes with my personality that I'm a passionate person. And so it's a 2-for-1. So I always just thought I was angry all the time. And actually what I found out was I actually felt other things. So let's say I made a pretty big mistake. Say I disrespected my mom in front of the family because I got irritated, and my aunts saw and called me out on it. Let's say, not an awesome way, but they still did. Right. And so I'm thinking, I'm just ticked at them. I'm just mad. Who do they think they are? Blah, 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 blah. Well, actually, there were emotions that happened in between. What I actually experienced was shame. I was embarrassed that I disrespected my mom, because that's not who I really wanted to be. And maybe I felt like it was justified. It was both, right? Right. So then I jumped to anger. Now, depending on the situation, I might lash out and be like, you don't have a right to talk to me, blah, 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 blah. And later, because I actually love Jesus and all of that, I get this lovely experience of guilt. Because now I've called people names, I've yelled, I've lost my temper, I don't even know what I said. And really, in the end, I didn't repair any relationships, I did damage there. Because I'm not a safe person now, because one of the things being a counselor is that I'm really good at calling out people's strengths, but I'm also really good at knowing their weaknesses. So I know right where to shove my finger. And so I've hurt people. And so in my anger to win, to be right, I end up having a boatload of guilt and hurting people. And so I could even throw sadness in here, but sadness isn't always on the table for me. And then I go, ooh, this isn't what God wants me to do. And I end up, and I go through this cycle, and I would get stuck in it. Okay, so as far as the chart goes, because this concept for me, I think, is real. It feels right. But it's confusing, and I'm still, unfortunately, I see why you've had me on training wheels. But it feels like it should break down in this group. So if I was going to, I heard your story. If I was going to put these on, your emotion that you didn't know, or that I was clueless about,
is shame.
Yes.
Okay. The prompting event is aunts called you out.
Yep. And
your urge was to be angry.
Right. So actually, my urge here would have been to hide or to conform, which we will get into. But how I dealt with being embarrassed, instead of sitting in this and recognizing my need was to either make it right with my mom or take a break, right? I put on anger, because anger was my coping skill. So instead of just dealing with feeling embarrassed, I lashed back out. because that's my coping skill. And being embarrassed, vulnerable, and making mistakes in my family, not okay. So anger wins.
Okay, so but going back to this, here's where I get confused. I look and I see of these primary emotions, I see shame and anger, and so it would seem like your answer of anger was an urge, is what you said. But in my mind, I would say no. You actually have got now two emotions, and I'm not even sure what the urge is.
Right. So these are all primary emotions, but they can be firecrackers interconnected.
I see.
And so what you have to identify is what you felt first. I was embarrassed first. So what the problem with these firecrackers is they're like real ones. It's really hard to differentiate sometimes. They all seem to slam right into each other.
Right.
And so I'm like, I just feel angry all the time. I would venture to say if you think you feel angry all the time, you actually have a whole cluster of feelings you feel, and anger is how you cope with it.
Because just by the time that your aunts got done talking, it was probably while you were talking, you felt shame, and then you were moving to anger so quick.
Yeah.
And so, but the key is if you don't fully understand what the real emotion, or I shouldn't say real emotion.
First emotion.
First emotion, right? That feels better. What the first emotion is, which is shame, then you really can't break that cycle.
Right.
Is that right?
So what I had to learn how to do for my cycle is how to sit and feeling okay with being embarrassed.
Yes.
So
I'm with you.
Listen,
I'm almost angry for you at this point.
There's a lot of the feelings are uncomfortable. But what happens is, what do I do? And what's like the deeper stuff for me was, what does it mean to be embarrassed? What does it mean to make a mistake? And what does it mean about my identity? And that's where the truth of God's word had to come in. It's okay for me to not be perfect. I can sit in embarrassment a lot easier now versus when I'm going to be rejected and no one's going to want me was the answer if I made a mistake. Then I can never feel this. So I better do anger.
And you go back to what is it like to be in a relationship with me? If I don't do the hard work early and go back and find out it's shame, then you're just going to continually do that loop. And really, it's not easy to be in a relationship with you because you're constantly going to do that loop.
Yes, and that's what it was for me in middle school and probably more high school with some choices that my father made. So my life, I had a lot of anger, and I thought I could put anger in this little box over here, the dad box, and it wasn't going to affect anywhere else. So the problem is emotions are a little bit like food coloring in water. Go ahead. You can put them in there. They're going to intermix, and you're going to have them show up. And so what I kept hearing over and over from people was, you're scary. Why? I'm a lovely, kind person. What are you talking about? I terrified people because I had this energy that came from being angry. And so I took it with me everywhere because I'm wherever I am. And so I would actually scare people, not have a lot of patience, be like this type of thing. Being a high drive person and anger mixing in really felt like people were getting run over. And so it took someone loving me enough to come in and say, you run over people, for me to have to kind of backtrack to this spot to realize the lack of forgiveness from my father and the anger around it was actually destroying many relationships, and I was hurting people when I didn't mean to. And it hurt enough that I was hurting people that it made it worth turning the corner. So
anger was the behavior. Your personality...
Well, anger's the emotion. My behavior was to fix and to step in.
Right. But because the way that God made you is passionate, it made the anger even worse.
Right. Amplified it. And that's why you'll have some tendencies. So those of us who are maybe more deep feelers... maybe instead of anger being your coping skill, sadness is. And so depression becomes a big overwhelming thing for you. Or shame. Like I talked about earlier, I just suck as a person. So anytime I get any kind of feedback or anything, I suck as a person, therefore I must go hide and isolate and stay away from everyone. I guess I can never do anything right, so why try? Like this process. But you'll notice it because it will show up over and over and over again because it's how you deal with relationship. And so we talked before about that limbic system, that automatic reflex, the same that I put my hands up, the ball coming at my face. You do the same thing with certain emotional things. So you'll have specific experiences in your history that tell you anger, sadness, this is how I'm supposed to deal with it, this is how I made it through that. And so learning what that reflex for you is emotionally is what we're talking about. Because that reflex was helpful in that moment, but it's clearly causing damage for for a long time here. It's not helpful anymore.
To your relationships.
Yeah, I don't want to snap at my kids when they make a mistake.
Right.
Or my friends or whatever that might be. But that's what I did growing up because anger works. Does it? Like, it didn't work. It was doing the opposite of what I intended. And I was completely out of control with it.
Okay, so to get a better idea of the action urge chart, which is key, because I feel like without doing it, you're going to have a hard time understanding what the emotions are that are driving behaviors.
Right. And so what's interesting is if you come to my class, we go through all 10 emotions and what they are. It's just too much for our podcast day. So if you come on Thursdays, I think starting here soon. Anyway, we actually walk through this entire chart of all of them. So we're just going to kind of walk through the experience you had when you got the feedback from your daughters.
Yes.
And so because that was a cycle, that's why we went back to a simple one emotion experience with anger. You had one emotion. This is a little bit more complex and you hit a cycle. So we're going to unpack that cycle.
Right. So the original homework was to go and ask other people around you, what are my values?
Right.
Because the topic was core values. What are your values? Well, that just led to a whole mess, or a mess for me anyways. What I found out is my girls told me that my values were watching football, playing Madden or playing football on video games, and yelling at the TV when sports is on.
Right.
And occasionally they felt like I valued, doing work around the house, which was not great. My response was I would hope that I was reflecting Jesus like I'm supposed to. I was supposed to be discipling them, and therefore, if Jesus is Lord of my life, they would see that clearly He is a value, and that is not the impression that I'm giving off. I can't blame them for their response.
It sometimes feels good to do that, though.
Yes,
it doesn't work and doesn't help you.
Right. It isn't like I didn't think about it, and so there I was stuck in that, and there was I was feeling a lot of things. So, anyways, help me out of this. It feels like a yarn ball to me. Right.
Your firecracker chain.
Yes, except it's all in my head.
Right. So what would be good is we're going to, so I was talking about cycles. It doesn't mean what we're going to unpack is a cycle for you. It'd be something for you to be curious about and explore and maybe even get feedback from other people. But we're going to kind of unpack it because it's more complex because it's multiple feelings rather than just the one.
So a cycle one of my cycles that make it difficult for me to be in a relationship with other people or people to be in a relationship with me could be interwoven in this yarn ball, but it's not necessarily this yarn ball.
Correct, because you can have things where you didn't eat and you were angry and didn't sleep well the night before and have the flu, and you're going to have a response that's not normal. If you're going to look for your loop, you're going to look for patterns over time in different situations with different people. When you start hearing the same thing in multiple at work, at home, and you need to start listening to that because likely that's where your loop is. So one situation doesn't necessarily dictate a loop. Okay. So, so how'd you feel? When you read the piece of paper, what did you feel?
I felt convicted. I felt like it was right because that's what they said. It wasn't what I wanted.
So those are all thoughts. Great job.
Right,
but we're looking for feelings. So how a
feeling,
big tell for you between a thought.
I felt terrible. That's not a feeling either.
The big difference between a thought and a feeling, which can be difficult for a lot of people. So I really feel like you don't care about me. That's not actually a feeling, even though I'm using the feeling word. A good clue is thoughts usually are multiple words. Emotions are typically one. Our list did not include multiple words. It's one. So it's usually a good clue to you. If you're putting a sentence together, likely you're doing a thought, not a feeling. So how did you feel?
And so am I supposed to pick it off the board?
No. I want you to tell me without looking at the board real quick because other people may not have the board.
I felt like cheating was an answer there. I felt bad. That's not right.
So let's stop. Why is it bad? Because people say that. I feel bad.
I felt bad because there was a gap in what was actually going on. to what was actually happening.
Right. So bad's actually not a feeling. We like to use it in our culture a lot. It's actually a judgment. I neither feel bad nor good. Feelings are neutral a little bit there, and we judge whether, so kind of more words to think about was it felt pleasant or unpleasant. In fact, if we look at this list over here,
yes.
What's really interesting is only 2 of them out of our 10 are actually pleasant to feel. I mean, unless you really like sadness, some people do, or adrenaline and fear is your thing, but for the most part, only 2 of those are actually pleasant. The rest are quite unpleasant, which is a real pushback in the face of our culture that said we should feel this all the time, right? Which there's a whole conversation between joy and happiness and all that jazz. But the other emotions are very present and part of your experience. So something's not wrong with you if you're feeling these. Mm-hmm. It's if they dominate your life and they're overwhelming to your life and they're not helping you be in a relationship with God and with other people, or they're getting in the way of some of that stuff, that's a whole different conversation. But they're neither bad nor good. They're neutral. So what I do with them that make them bad or good.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, this is harder than it looks, okay? I felt...
So now you can cheat. You can cheat.
I felt shame, I would say. I felt shame because... the thing I value most is my relationship with God and my relationship with my family, and it's in this situation, my daughters. And my whole thought priority value would be that I was discipling my daughters, but clearly I was missing the mark on that. So I felt shame because I wasn't doing that.
Okay.
How's that?
It's a great start.
Oh, phew, I'm exhausted. And frankly, the last thing I want to do is not eat. I want to eat something.
Yes.
That doesn't seem like a good response at all. It's like stopping eating.
Right. Sometimes. So we'll start here with shame. I'm actually going to pull out guilt because these get mixed up a lot too.
Okay.
Because I heard some things that are mixing these two. So let's talk about kind of how they're different. Guilt really is I did something bad. So it's more behavior focused. Okay, and shame is I am bad, more like I'm doing identity, which I'm just going to say ID on that.
Well, in this situation, I feel like, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like shame is more accurate because the reality is I didn't do something, that's the problem. I didn't do something. If I did something, I wouldn't have had this response.
Right.
If I did something right.
So you're experiencing your firecracker chain.
I guess so.
Yeah, we might have something else up here as well. And that's the point, is this is maybe where you ended, but it's not where you started. And we've talked about how knowing where you start is where if I learn how to sit where I have my first emotion, that's where my need is, and that's where I can start to figure out where I need to go. How
in the world? It seemed like an hour and a half. I'm sure that's real time. It took me quite a while, and I had to cheat off the board to come up with shame and guilt. Yeah. But you're saying that's not even it. That's actually more of an urge?
So these cause urges.
Okay.
You're in the fire. So the firecracker means you go through the whole thing. Each time. But you do it faster than I can snap.
Right. That part I'll buy.
Yes. So to kind of help us figure out where we're going and sorting out, because I'm hearing both language in there, is that, so guilt is when I violate, what sets it off is when I violate my own values.
Yes. Now, is that for everybody or just this story?
Everyone. I did something I know is bad.
So going back to your story with your aunt, it's the aunts called you on something, but the reality was when that happened, you realized you violated your own values.
Yeah, so actually guilt was in there. So great identifier. Guilt was in there, and then I am a bad person because I did that. Now I'm shifting gears. And
this happened like that, and we moved on to anger for you.
Yeah, and then I was like, I don't want to feel that. So I know what feels more powerful. This is vulnerable. I don't like to feel shame, embarrassed, and vulnerable. That's weak. Anger's powerful. I mean, manage that. yeah, it is powerful to the point people feel hurt and abused verbally around you.
Right.
And so they do go like this around you, right? So again, doesn't mean anger's bad. It's not bad or good. It's what I do with it. Because like being angry at the right things absolutely can.
Right.
So, I had situations where, let's say if we had child abuse going on, I should get angry.
Right.
And my anger should want me to step in. How I step in is where it comes into whether I represent Jesus or not. And I clearly wasn't. I wasn't a Christian during that cycle time either. Or well, later I was, but I was a new Christian. So the anger is not bad. It's what I do with it. You see, sins are behaviors. So what do I do if I'm feeling envy? What do I do if I'm feeling jealous? Do I go and seek to destroy the other person? Or do I go before the Lord and go, this is a desire I have, and I put it at your feet because you give me good things. If you give me good things, then you know the desire of my heart. Help me to know what to do with this.
But, and the more I can start to break these things apart, these firecrackers, if I can get this string stretched a little bit, then I'm not just constantly responding.
Right. So, yeah. So we have kind of stimulus, which is kind of what happened. Something happened. My aunt called me out. I missed the bus, whatever it might be. Stimulus and then response. Something happened and I respond to it. The distance between these two is what we call choice. But for some of us, a reflex, right? The choice between putting my hands up before the ball hits my face. If I spend too much thinking about that, I'm going to get hit in the face.
Right.
So my limbic system said, got you, got you, got you. You
Right.
have the same thing emotion-wise. And so some of us, this is how we experience feelings. It's happening and I'm responding instantly. And so part of what we'll get into later is how do I stretch this out so I have more of an opportunity for choice? And sometimes you don't want it. If I'm in a room that's on fire, I don't want to be like, should I be afraid? No, I'm going to think about that as I die of smoke inhalation. Like God gave me fear. He gave me these emotions for a reason. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm afraid. This is the adrenaline I need for my body to get me out of the room so I live. So that's why we don't say bad or good. We say unpleasant or pleasant, because maybe the unpleasant feeling is to motivate you to go where God would like you to go. And that's where shame, we want to go, it's always bad or whatever. Sometimes not. Being embarrassed by my aunt, should I have been disrespecting my mom? Nope. It's not honoring to her. It doesn't make and help us feel close to each other. It's not honoring to God, and how I treat other people does affect my relationship with God. The hope is that shame doesn't overwhelm me to where I go to my room and eat an entire pizza instead, or go and spend a bunch of money, or go and scream and yell at people. But if I were to actually go, ooh, I'm embarrassed, I feel like I need to make that right. And I respond to that. One, I quit feeling embarrassed. And two, I am correcting to where God wants me to be. But if I decide, so the story I think about with this, so shame is when I violate other people's or the community's values.
So this would be like, it's a known thing, like a taboo.
Yes.
Everyone knows that this is a value that everybody has.
Yep.
Okay.
And so this would, like going up, probably most places in America, going up in a mall and a little lady in a wheelchair and just slapping her in the face.
Right.
What's happening?
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's other people.
And everybody around you is going to go, whoa.
Right.
Right? And then you see all their eyes, and that's, woo, you're feeling this, okay?
Right.
That's shame. Then maybe I feel guilt because why am I slapping a little old lady in the face?
Right.
And there may be context, maybe, I don't know, but
Right.
Let's just say. So what's interesting is if I violate other people's values, I have to consider this. This is really complicated in the aspect of when you think about our culture that wants us to, because the urge with here is to appease, but I also like to say to conform or to hide. So for those of us who have faith and maybe we don't agree with sweeping wide cultural changes and shifts, we maybe just don't want to talk to me about it. Be like, I don't agree with that, so I don't want to talk about it. Or I want to look like everybody else. Because shame really is about rejection. You're not part of the group. You violated the group values and now we're putting you out. And so your desire is to be part of the group. Now, just because I have the urge doesn't mean I do it.
Right.
But it's the urge. It's the people pleasing. If you struggle with people pleasing, you're in the zone, big time.
So, and I get conforming and hiding, especially when you're talking about other people's norms. Basically, you are being a hypocrite to yourself, but no one knows that as long as you're playing the game. I understand that. It makes it a lot easier when we're talking about you. I do know that. That seems a way clearer.
Yes.
So I get this on. Well, I could get to where I felt guilty and I felt shame, pretty easy because it's I care about my relationship with God and I care and I know. Oh, and I care about my relationship with my daughters. I also know down here in the shame category that God also cares about discipleship. The church I work for talks about discipleship all the time.
Yes.
And I am not living that out in my home. So I feel guilt and shame. The problem is you go to what my primary thing is.
It's harder. So this is so we are doing something that's complicated. This is a process that takes time. It's okay to baby step stuff. And even if you're not 100%, give yourself some time. If this is like, oh my gosh, this is a complete foreign language, what? I highly recommend you come to my class because we'll go through all of these and it will kind of help a little bit better. And we'll have 8-9 weeks to unpack stuff. So you have more time. Or you might want to explore some counseling to really start to help do this if this is a totally different language for you. So what we're doing is complicated. It's kind of like being at LMNOP, and it's okay to be at ABC. And in the same way that you learn how to spell, you don't start out with sentences or complicated words. You start out with the letters. So it's kind of like these are your alphabet for feelings that you're starting out. And so this might be a little complicated, but it's kind of give the idea of how it works. And so guilt, the urge here is, if I'm ready to deal with it, is to repair. If I'm not ready, it's to avoid. Like if I hurt my friend's feelings and I know I did bad and I'm at the grocery store and I turn down the aisle, I see my friend doesn't see me, but I'm not ready to say, ooh, sorry, I did that. Whoop, I don't need that aisle, right? And again, the urge, maybe I fight that and turn and go talk to her, but maybe I don't, right? So these actually have two options. Not all of the emotions do, like anger was to step in. Now, it still looks different to your personality and your culture and place as to what stepping in looks like or what repairing looks like or avoiding, right? Because avoiding really is... could be whatever your pet sin is or whatever that type of, could be eating, it could be pornography, it could be buying. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Basically, and all of us are different. Busyness, that can be a huge one for me, that I'm running away from what I'm feeling. Because one of the things that's really hard about feelings, if you don't deal with it, is they're like a beach ball in water. Just because I shove them under the water does not mean the beach ball's not there anymore. Totally there. And eventually my arm will get tired and that sucker's going to pop up. And the hope is nobody's close enough to me to get nailed in the face. In fact, the further I push the beach ball down, the more pressure I create for that sucker to boom. And so for people who maybe don't express feelings, if they experience moments where they have their meltdown for the year or their every few months blowout, they're experiencing this beach ball experience. And the hope is to bring it on the water surface with you, and then you can have fun with the ball. And it can be a beautiful opportunity to connect and play with others, which is what emotions are for. They're helping us bond and connect with God and bond and connect with each other, and letting us know what our needs are. And so in this process, you had some guilt and some shame. I wonder if there's something up here. I don't actually know. So this is exploring.
I struggle with that. I mean, I get in your scenario with the loop and the anger was the urge. I get that. And maybe that's the breakdown of this particular story is, I thought about it. It's like, here's your results. And I think back about it. It's guilt and shame. It's the I can't come up with anything else other than, oh, wasn't what I was expecting. What's the ramifications of that? And I go right to guilt and shame.
Okay.
I don't have like
another one that you're thinking
those
of.
That's pretty. That's
Yeah.
pretty
So
large.
this could be true. Could be. What would be good is to look at the list and see, are there any other feelings that might fit? And if the answer is no, no is okay. And thinking about what your first response was. When you were holding the piece of paper, you got the feedback, what was your first response?
Well, shock, which is not on there. It's not an emotion.
It is an emotion. It's complicated. We're going to come back to shock later.
You do not want to go down there.
Yeah, it would kind of be, anyway, but yeah.
Well, disgust. I mean, yeah. Didn't want to think about it. I wanted to get it away from me. That's I guess if you disgust yourself, that is guilt, though.
Oh, so could
I know.
Be,
It's terrible.
Yeah. So, kind of think about your chain here, the firecracker chain.
Yes.
Do you think that you felt guilt and recognized you violated your own values and then were disgusted by it?
Oh yeah.
Or did you feel disgust?
No, it was guilt. I felt guilt right away.
Okay, so we'll roll with it.
I linked it. Here's the that doesn't match my. I mean, I literally had the.
Yeah.
That isn't what I value. This isn't what I value. This is the feedback I'm getting.
I'm not doing what I want.
Yes, and the repair avoid thing makes a lot of sense, especially when you're talking about broad, more than one person.
Right.
Everybody has this value. It's not just me, and so I'll just follow along like a lemming. Right.
So it gets complicated. So the idea was to avoid, because what did you want to do? As soon as you got this feedback.
I wanted to. It felt like such a big rock that I wanted to do what I always do when I'm dealing with something I'm confused by, that I care about is isolate, and I just think about it. Just think continually about the situation. And a lot of times that doesn't lead to anything, but I just...
do you want to do that with people, be around people? Or
never with people. Never with people. Any people. Yeah. In my hot tub. Okay.
Do you want to see anybody?
No, I certainly do not want to see anybody.
You were like,
I don't want to text
Did you
anybody.
want to be near your family? Did you want to go inside and be near them?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, avoid. So this is our clue. So this is kind of getting like we're playing detective, right? So I can use some of these things to kind of go back. So in this case, it probably does make sense. So I'm recognizing I want to go hide in my hot tub. Time to be curious. What happened that makes you want to go hide in my hot tub?
It's because I looked at I violated my own values, but it seems like it is such a large thing. I can't repair it at this point. So I
can't fix it.
I can't fix it.
So I'm done.
It's too late now.
It's too late now. I can't fix it. So I'm just broken.
Yes.
Okay. So we flipped from here down to here, which is honestly really common for a lot of us, right? So the difference with guilt and shame, like I lied, I'm a liar. That's kind of how these kind of start to go in, that identity piece. So again, I want to maybe try to hide it and be away.
Okay, so I got it.
Okay.
So I go to the hot tub, and which I avoid. I would like to repair it, but it feels like it's too big a thing for me to repair. I feel like I am stuck, and it's all over with. Right. I miss my opportunity. I miss my whatever.
What's all over with?
My opportunity to disciple my girls, because I've already, you only get so many opportunities,
Right.
when they're growing up and in relationships, and I didn't realize it, and I made a mistake, and I think it's just too late to change the course at this time. It's like a tree that grew up next to another tree, and so it tried to get light, and so now it's bent, and now that other tree is gone, but it's like this, and it's not coming back. It's gonna stay like this.
Okay. So it's a lot of guilt. So
I have a tree like that behind my house.
okay, that's why it's sticking
Just
with you.
right there.
Okay.
I actually can
So
see it
you
from my hot tub if you
violated
follow
your
that.
own values.
Yes.
But how about down in this space?
Well, I let God down too.
Okay.
And I mean, and talk about other people's values. I let God down, and I know that that's not just a feeling. That's also I know that from a head level that I didn't disciple my kids, and also discipling people around you, especially your kids, is certainly a something that this church cares about a ton
Right.
too. So everyone around me's values don't match what I've done.
Right. So would the words maybe at the moment in the time doesn't mean it wouldn't shift.
Sure.
I was not a good Christian.
Oh, 100%.
I'm bad, right?
I'm bad, yeah.
Yeah. And so want to hide, or I want to appease. I want to make that better potentially, right?
Yeah.
So what can happen here is that we have we violate other people's values. So we have this shame piece. So this guilt and shame, and kind of like what is really important as we go through this process is what do I do with it, right?
Yes.
And so it makes me think of like the difference between like Peter and Judas, right? Judas betrays Jesus, recognizes he didn't raise from the dead like he was supposed to, or not raised from the dead, but like he didn't stop and throw and become the kingdom because he was a zealot, right? So you're supposed to take over. It doesn't happen, and now I'm the one that did it. And so he goes and he takes his life, right? And Peter, on the other hand, Jesus foretells him, okay, you're going to deny me 3 times, which is no bigger disgrace than to deny your rabbi. And 3 times, and then they make eye contact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Calls his shot.
Woo!
Yeah.
But what does Peter do with it? He doesn't actually give up hope. He comes back to Jesus and says, but you can fix it. And so it's kind of like at this point where you're saying, I broke it, it's too late. Is it too late in God's economy for your daughters to be discipled?
I would say no, but if we're talking about we're talking about how I felt.
Right, at the time, which is why it's important. It's always a snapshot. When you're doing something like this, it's a snapshot in a moment. If I haven't done this before, one of my favorite things about emotions, the word emotion, is that it motion. They move, okay? But they're still telling you what your need is, right? So really, if we're coming back to guilt, and the reason why we want to identify the emotion and which one happened first is my action urge is telling me something. And yours is saying, I want to repair. Now, it's a whole different conversation about having hope that God can come back and create that opportunity for you to repair, right? But it's, I violated my own values. Now I have the opportunity to be curious, what do I want to do about that? Because if I want the guilt to move, I need to address the problem associated with it. So what could you do?
Well, it's interesting. I just realized that just by you talking that I other people's values and my values is that Christ is Redeemer. I have quickly made a jump in my head without really thinking about it, and I am telling Christ basically, he can't redeem this situation, or in fact me.
Right.
Because it is too late.
Right.
So now I feel guilty and shameful about that. So now it's just, I'm actually
So
feeling
again,
way worse.
Feeling these
Beth.
these feelings move. So that's good to know. Just because you feel bad now doesn't mean you will later.
That's true. That's true.
So if you can learn to embrace the discomfort, the unpleasantness of these, long enough to wonder what they look like. It's kind of like lights on a dashboard of a car. I can ignore the gas light or the check engine oil.
Right.
For consequences. I can ignore the guilt I feel about not discipling my family. So if God lets me know I've got a problem, Beth, you have an anger problem, I can ignore and go, I'm just going to avoid that crap. It's fine. It's fine. Nope. I feel guilty. Nope. And then continue to not have friends and to destroy people and then be sad and lonely because that's what it reaped. My anger was not righteous. It was not done as God would have it, and I was hurting people, and it was devastating to me. Or I can go, ooh, I'm feeling guilty about this. Why? And I start to use the tool of curiosity to backtrack, which is why you want all three columns, because if I don't know what sets it off, I can't identify if it's real or not. Is it true? Because like for those of us who deal with people pleasing. I feel guilty. My son who's using substances is going to be homeless and on his own, and I just feel so guilty. Did you actually do anything wrong? Or is this a choice that your son needs? And in fact, stepping in to constantly take away his discomfort stops him from maybe actually turning towards the Lord and having the pain enough to change because you make it comfortable enough for him to not change.
Right.
So your guilt doesn't fit the facts. It's not helpful. And so I need to not try to repair his problem of where he's living right now. Yeah,
because you're actually causing him to avoid the problem.
Yeah, you're helping him stay longer in the pain.
Right.
When he could actually maybe get out of it.
So yes, I would. The answer is I do think that. What am I specifically going to do? I don't know right now.
Right,
but there is a plan. I do believe that God would want to help me do something and repair that situation I'm in.
Yeah, right.
And redeem me, and because.
Right, and you already see how the level of this is already shifted in the way you're talking.
Yes.
And that's the point.
Going the level meaning
intensity level of the guilt.
Yeah. Also, I feel like it's less shame. It's not who I am
because you know who you are.
Right.
Who are you?
I'm redeemable, and
Jesus did what I couldn't.
Right. But therefore, then I work on it, and then it's something I did.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be something I do in the future.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah. So. These two are probably the most complicated feelings as far as it really dives in and gets it. So you went for the heavy to start.
Well,
which
that's
is great.
where I live.
And really, honestly, most of us as Christian probably do sit in this cycle quite a bit. You see this in the garden, right? Adam and Eve messed up, and they covered it up. What are you talking about? I know what you're talking about. I cover up my nakedness.
Right.
Who told you were naked?
Yeah.
Right? So this is built in from the first. And so this is part of that, and that's why Jesus said there's not condemnation anymore.
That's really good. And I can see like you said, it's the importance of really filling out these three components on. Now mine went a different layer. It wasn't as easy as the anger one.
Right.
But, to start thinking about this on your own, I think is positive, at least to be curious. I think that's huge. And but a lot of times it's going to take help. It's going to take people that you're in relationship with, godly people that you know, and potentially taking your class or getting counseling, finding counseling on your own.
If I put a 4-year-old and just put letters in front of them, does that ever teach them how to read?
Right.
They need someone to help them put them together. What does it look like? How do we do sentences? Emotion, we learn as much as we learn logical things. And so you may need someone to show you how to put sentences together for emotions. And it's not shameful that you should have done it sooner. I joke a lot with my people about shoulding on yourself. The judgment doesn't help you. It doesn't move you forward. In fact, it helps you stay stuck. It does not help you progress, which is, I think, a big part of why God doesn't like it. He came in to remove it because he doesn't want us to be stuck anymore. He wants us to move forward.
So next time we'll talk about breaking up these things.
Well, we'll talk a little bit because this is more about like one of the ways to be curious. One of the other ways we'll be curious is it's not just my urge that tells me what I'm feeling. Another clue is what my body is doing because I have an actual body sensational response to feelings.
Okay. And also we're going to ask her about, because I'm curious and we didn't get to it, the difference between jealousy and envy, because I'm pretty sure they're the same thing. But we'll find out next time on What Is It Like to Be in a Relationship with Me?